Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. I'm so
I know,
excited.
me too. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. My light decided to go
Awesome.
out, so hopefully everyone can see me.
No, yeah, your lighting's great. I'm so excited. I feel like
I
I've
know.
wanted to connect with you for forever. I just always resonate with everything you put out. So
Same
this feels
here.
overdue.
Yay, I'm so excited.
Yay.
Let me set this up. Okay. So I'll give it a little bit more to let people on. I like your light behind
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. My salt lamp, my Himalayan
Like it.
salt lamp
I
is
like
looking
it.
so good.
Funny. All right, let's see. Okay, so why don't we get started? And I'll introduce myself, then I'll introduce you, and we'll
Okay.
go from there. And then for people who have questions, just kind of keep them in your heads, and then we'll ask at the end. The only thing, and I think I can speak for you as well, we can't answer any personal therapy questions as far as your own situations, as Instagram is not therapy. So, um,
Exactly. Yes.
okay, so Dr. Morgan Anderson is a clinical psychologist and relationship coach, host of the Let's Get Vulnerable podcast, and creator of the ESL relationship method, which I'll have you explain. She helps women break the toxic dating cycle, raise their self-worth, and attract the healthy relationships they've always wanted. And she's on Instagram, Dr. Morgan Coaching. Definitely check out her page. She has amazing stuff, the kind of quotes that I resonate with too. I think we kind of have the same style where you kind of read it and you
Yes.
get that that zinger in your stomach.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
so she's no BS. She says it like it is, and I really respect her for that. So I'm super excited to have you, and I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell people who you are, what you do, and kind of the details of your practice.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I am a relationship coach and clinical psychologist. I do both online through telehealth. And I have the ESL relationship method, which stands for Empowered, Secure, and Loved. And basically, I've developed a coaching program that uses attachment theory and cognitive behavioral interventions to help you move from whether you're anxiously attached, avoidantly attached, disorganized, to help you move towards secure attachment and do that internal work
Mm-hmm.
that helps you bring that quality partner into your life. So I've been doing that now for a couple of years and I've helped so many women, and it's just been incredible to watch it grow and the impact that we've been able to make. So yeah, and I have the podcast, Let's Get Vulnerable, which I've officially invited you on, by the way. I would love to
Oh,
have you
good.
on
Yay, I
there
would love to.
at
Thank
some
you.
point. But
I
it's
would love
all
to.
relationship advice and talking about attachment theory and just how to, show up secure in our
Hmm.
relationships.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. I forgot to introduce myself, so I guess I should do that.
Please intro
For those of you
yourself.
who don't know me, I'm Dr. Jamie Zuckerman. I'm a clinical psychologist outside of Philadelphia, and I specialize in adult depression, anxiety, everyday stressors, um, relationship issues, particularly those who are with a toxic partner, narcissistic partner. And I have a subspecialty in clinical health psych, so I tend to see a lot of neurological type illnesses, epilepsy, MS, things like that. And yeah, that's what I do. So I'm gonna get started kind of asking you some questions so we can kind of get the ball rolling on our plastic plant topic, which I can't take credit for that title. That was genius. Everybody loved it. It was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good. So we're going to talk about non-reciprocal relationships, and non-reciprocal relationships can get a little bit tricky because, and I'm sure you'll kind of go into this, but you first have to make sure that not you have to make sure that you really aren't getting what you need, and maybe you're just getting it in a different way that you don't recognize as getting your needs met. So if you need hand holding and hugging, and that's how you view love and attachment,
Yeah.
but your partner's giving it to you in a different way, let's say by having long conversations with you about their day, things like that. So that's how they show love. So sometimes it's just kind of a mismatch thing. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there first. What we're talking about is kind of the absence of that altogether, where you're really getting nothing back. And it can be exhausting. It can be confusing. You may start to doubt yourself, doubt your choices. And it can be lonely, right? So you have to, and
Yes.
I think a lot of the women that I work with that are in this situation, they don't tell their friends about it. It's almost like they're ashamed, they're embarrassed. So we're going to get into all of that. So I'll let you kind of take it away with non-reciprocal relationships and the definition of it and go from there.
Sounds good. Yes, and I love the plastic plant metaphor
So good.
because it speaks to this idea of, hey, if somebody is a plastic plant, you can water it, you can give it sunlight, you can do all the things, but a plastic plant is not going to grow, right? So it's the same if it's that kind of relationship. You can invest, you can have the best energy, you can communicate well, do all the things, but if that person doesn't want to grow with you, there's nothing that you can do. So it's really helpful to learn to recognize a plastic plant relationship early on so you can save your energy, because you and I know that your energy is your most precious resource. It's so valuable, and we want you to invest it into relationships that can grow and can give back to you. So that's plastic plant metaphor. And actually, I have to give credit to Halsey for that metaphor specifically. It was from a Halsey song, so thank you, Halsey. But I've been writing about it for a while. But yeah, so fitting for a non-reciprocal relationship. And I love what you said about the shame piece. I think that doesn't get talked about enough. Of sometimes we can really internalize this and think it's something we're doing wrong, thinking we're too much, our standards are too high, and we feel shame and we don't talk about it. So that's why I'm so glad we're having this tonight. Like, let's talk about it. Let's put it out there.
Can you talk a little bit about the early warning signs, red flags? So we always talk about warning signs and red flags of, at least I do, narcissistic relationships and those intense toxic relationships and the red flags for those. But we don't really talk about the red flags for a non-reciprocal relationship, usually because in the beginning of non-reciprocal relationships, when everyone's on their best behavior, it usually feels like a very calm, cool, collected, easygoing, no highs, no lows, just very stationary. And in the beginning, that can be confused as stability. So if you can kind of tell us the red flags for that so we could differentiate between those.
Absolutely. Yeah, really good point. So one of the first things I would say to think about is that this is somebody who likely is not comfortable with the DTR conversations, aka defining the relationship. Where is this going? What do we want? What do we see for the future? And I always tell people, you don't have to be on the same page. You're likely not going to go at the same pace or be on exactly the same page, but you have to be comfortable having the conversations. So if this person is just not comfortable showing up and having those conversations with you, that's definitely a sign.
So somebody asked, I'm going to save the questions to the end, but I actually was thinking of clarifying this too, and somebody brought it up, is somebody who is in a non-reciprocal type in the relationship, a commitment phobic. And no, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but they also could be the opposite, and they could be very content on just being in the relationship because they don't have to make any emotional big decisions. It's comfortable, it's consistent, it's stable. There's no highs and lows. So they could be commitment phobic and avoid it altogether, or they could do the opposite and get very comfortable very fast because there's less energy, less effort, less emotion that may be involved in that.
Yeah, non-reciprocal, I think, can really be understood as this person is not giving to the relationship and not going at the depth in which you want to go. You're not deepening. So it could be that they're just comfortable and they're just kind of coasting, whereas you're wanting to deepen, you're wanting to get closer to them. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Any
they're
other
part of
red
the thing.
any other red flags that
Yeah,
that people can look for?
I have a list because I didn't want to
Yes.
forget them.
Yes, I
So,
want to hear your list.
so the second one that I identified was if they are invalidating your emotions, and this is a little bit of could be a narcissistic sign as well, right? But
Hmm.
um, in a non-reciprocal relationship, it can look like them just not really being comfortable with your emotional expression
Hmm.
and invalidating your emotional experience.
Can you talk about what that may look like, what that invalidating experience may actually look like to somebody else?
Yeah, so if you're saying to someone, hey, I felt really disappointed when we had a date planned and then you canceled it 2 hours before, I felt really hurt. And they're saying, like, get over it, like it's not that big of a deal, or it's you're being too much, or don't
Hmm.
worry, I'll just see you next week, right? Like they're
Hmm.
trying to just invalidate your
Hmm.
experience. We
Because
want to
they're
partner
uncomfortable with the emotion. Right.
because they're uncomfortable, right? That's a really important distinction, right? Like their capacity for
Yes.
emotional
Yes.
discussions is very low.
Yes. I like to say they're
So
limited. They're very
they're
limited.
limited.
They're limited. Yep.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And and here's the important distinction. That's not on you. You
Correct.
didn't do anything wrong.
Correct. And that's where
Right.
by the time I get women, usually women, men too, but I mostly women, um,
Yeah.
I usually get them at the point where they feel like it's almost like they have to ask, am I asking for too much? Am I crazy? And, and because it's confusing if your emotions are constantly kind of shot down or invalidated, you tend to just keep them to yourself. And,
Right.
you know, we could talk about familiar patterns and why you may feel comfortable keeping it down. That may be something that you're familiar with. But
Mhm.
somebody asked if this is the same as gaslighting. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that the invalidation of the emotions and the crazy making and wondering if you're overreacting, if you're asking for too much. The difference is in a non-reciprocal relationship, the non-reciprocal partner isn't doing it to manipulate you, to control you, to make you depend on them for their perception of reality. They're not trying to make you doubt yourself. It's a byproduct of this, but it's not the intention. Whereas the intention with a non-reciprocal person actually has nothing to do with you. It has to do with their limited capability, limited capacity to join with you on an emotional level that you're at. So it may feel the same, but the underlying functions are extremely different. I don't if you want to add to
Yes.
that or anything.
I completely agree. 100%. I really appreciate that distinction. And I think also one thing to keep in mind, at least this was my experience, is having gone through a
Mm,
relationship with a narcissist in the past made me much more vulnerable to get into
yes,
non-reciprocal
yes,
dynamics because
yes,
that's what I was more used to.
yes, yes,
So
exactly.
it is a
Yes,
distinction, but it definitely can also look sort of similar, but
yes,
different motives.
yes,
Absolutely.
exactly. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, I'll finish your red
No,
flag list.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I can move on to the next one that I wrote down.
Yeah,
Point
God.
number 3. Okay. So I think another sign, and this will happen early on, you'll start to notice, is if you are doing all of the planning and you're doing all of the reaching out and basically you're the one that's putting in the energy and you're just not getting that back. If every weekend it's up to you to plan the date and make the reservation and all of that, that's a sign that that energy is not being given back to you.
Hmm. And how much of that is kind of stereotyped that, women tend to be the social ones, the plan makers, the organizers?
You know, I feel like we are at the point in our history where we can expect more of men. We don't need to rely on those stereotypes. We can ask them to meet us, right? So
Mm-hmm.
honestly, my approach is that it is coming from both people, that you take
Mm-hmm.
turns,
Mm-hmm.
right? That one date you're planning it, the next they are. And that's not too much to ask. So,
Yes.
so women, I think we can't let men off, let them off the hook. We need to
Mm-hmm.
ask them to also show up, because that takes time, that takes
Mm-hmm.
energy. We don't have to be doing all of the energy and labor of the relationship. It's fair to expect that of your partner as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you think that that's something that fluctuates throughout the relationship? Does it die down on the non-reciprocal person's part? Are they kind of on better behavior, so to speak, in the beginning?
I would say so, yes, because in the beginning, it's still comfortable, right? We're not at
Mm-hmm.
that deep emotional
Mm-hmm.
intimacy, so they're still feel
Yeah.
very comfortable. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah,
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah. As you get more emotionally invested and you spend more time together and those conversations are getting deeper,
Mm-hmm.
that person may not feel as comfortable putting energy in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Point number 4.
Okay, number 4. So this is a really important one, and I think this goes just for all relationships, but if you feel like you can't be yourself, or you feel like, oh, I'm being too much, or I'm not able to ask for what I really need. So you gave the example of um, I think it was like someone who needs physical touch, but they were getting words of affirmation. But let's say you're asking your partner like, hey, you know, once a day, I really need just a hello text from you or a checking in text. And if they're telling you that that's too much, or they're not willing to do that. So, but this is also just like a feeling. Like you need to be able to feel how you would if you were in a relationship with a close friend, of that
Mm-hmm.
I can be myself, I can
Mm-hmm.
ask for what I need, I can get
Mm-hmm.
my needs met, right? So this is the point where I want you to think about, how do I feel? I think so often in relationships we're constantly thinking about, what are they thinking? Do they
Mm-hmm.
like me? Are they into me? How do you feel? Are you able to show up and be yourself in the relationship? Or are you constantly walking on eggshells, trying to think like, oh my gosh, what is going to make them put in more effort and put in more energy?
And for people that are saying, you have to put the effort in, you have to meet them halfway, I also want to make clear that oftentimes the sometimes there's not even an awareness on the non-reciprocal person's part that they are deficient or lacking in some way. Their awareness of that may not be the best,
Mm-hmm.
and they may not have the emotional maturity or the cognitive ability to be on that deep level. Some people's brains just don't work like that. Some people's brains are way more dichotomous, way more all or nothing. So there's a difference between not wanting to do it versus really having a difficult time to actually grasp the concept and do it. And I find that the people that have a difficult time are more willing to go to couples therapy than the people who truly just, they're not going to do it because they don't think they need to or want to.
Such a good point. And I think this once again comes back to knowing that that's not about you,
Right.
that's not your fault, that this is people's past experiences, their relationship template, as I like to
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I call it
and
relationship
that's
roadmap.
yeah, the
Yeah.
roadmap, right? Yeah. And that's not something that you have power over. That's
Yes.
something that they're bringing with them
Yes.
into the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually such a good segue to my next point,
Mm-hmm.
which is number 5, the number 5 sign that you're in a relationship with a plastic plant. And it is, if you give them feedback and they get defensive or they don't take it in and they're
Mm-hmm.
not willing to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So for that person where intimacy just feels difficult, but they want to do it and they're capable, if you give them feedback, maybe they will learn to invest emotionally, put energy in. But if you give them feedback and they get defensive, they're, you know, then that's a sign that they're not willing to grow and do the work with you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And do you find that, and I know the answer, but I want other people to kind of grasp this concept, but do you find that there is a certain type of person that tends to gravitate towards a non-reciprocal relationship?
Yes. So, you know, I love attachment theory, and I know you are familiar with it as well. When we have the relationship roadmap, that love is unavailable to us, or that we have to work hard for love, or that our, you know, our partners are not going to be there, they may abandon us, we develop anxious attachment style. And anxious attachment style makes us very vulnerable to choosing emotionally unavailable, non-reciprocal partners.
And that's because that's what we're used to. Is that what you're saying? And
Yeah.
because somebody's used to that, the message that they got early on, that internalized narrative they tell themselves, is that, like you said, they're not worthy of love, or it doesn't really matter because it doesn't mean anything because they're going to leave anyway, or it's, you know, push, pull, push, pull. So even if they give you love, it can be, you know, used and taken away if you don't do something that they want. So it's very unstable. And so they kind of seek that out, that they're not worthy of love. So they end up gravitating towards people who can't give it to them anyway. And I think it makes them feel safer, but at the same time, it continues to confirm that narrative that they're not worthy of love. So it's kind of this vicious cycle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to just add on to that by saying the other piece is when they see that the love isn't being given, it's not reciprocal, and they see that it's unavailable, they take it as a challenge of, I just have to work harder. I have to give more and more and more, and then this person will give to me. Whereas if I'm securely attached, I see that it's not being reciprocated and I move on.
And what does moving on look like in a relationship? Is it only leaving the relationship, or are there other ways to move on within the relationship?
Great question. I would say I always tell people, give people the opportunity to meet you. Give people the opportunity to grow. So moving on first looks like giving that feedback, having those tough conversations, give the person the opportunity. But then if after you do that, they're still not growing with you, then yes, it looks like exiting the relationship and going to water a plant that can grow, right? Like give your energy somewhere where it can be appreciated.
And I would think too that if a person was so used to that, the abandonment or not receiving love, and so they get into these non-reciprocal relationships, they don't really have a barometer of what is too much, what is too little. How do you know you're asking for too much or too little, or something that's over the top? Because they have no kind of guide. They have no rule book for that.
Yes. And I think this is where the internal work is so important. And part of what's so empowering is really working on that relationship with you so that you can learn to give yourself what you need. And I always tell my clients, a relationship cannot give you anything that you can't give yourself.
I love that.
Really, right?
Will you repeat that? I love that.
A relationship cannot give you anything that you cannot give yourself. So if you work on giving yourself what you need, and then you just see a relationship as a multiplier, right? Like I feel loved, and a relationship can multiply that love.
Yeah, that's what I say. It should enhance your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It can enhance. It can't fill a void. So you work on that relationship with you, right? And then you're able to make these decisions much more effectively.
Yeah.
So if someone's not showing up, you're able to say, okay, they're not showing up. Let me approach this instead of I need this person. I need them to fill the
Mm-hmm.
void. So I'm going to just put
Mm-hmm.
up with the crumbs, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, it confirms that I'm not worthy because you get stuck in that. And also, um, for people that are trying to fill that void, it makes it so much harder for them to leave the relationship because they feel if that person kind of fills that void for them and they leave the relationship, they feel they're going to leave their sense of self in that relationship. Who are they without this other person? That person, their self-worth is contingent on that other person. And so if they break away from them, they're breaking in their mind, they don't know who they are. They don't know,
Yeah.
what their interests are, what they like, those kind of things. So
Yes.
it's hard for people. That's why I'm sure you hear all the time, why don't they just leave? Why can't they just get out? It's not that easy.
It's not that easy.
Mm-mm.
No. Mm-mm. Yeah, which is why this topic is so important and
Mm-hmm.
why
Mm-hmm.
I really love teaching on relationships
Yeah.
because so much of it is about that healing of that relationship with you and you stepping into your power so
Mm-hmm.
that you can have those healthy relationships.
Yeah, and I love
Yeah.
this topic because, at least on my ends, from what I talk about, um, I'm always talking about the loud, toxic behaviors, the ones that are really sneaky and manipulative and then, abusive and but this is equally as distressing.
Yeah.
It just looks different. And the loss of sense of self-worth, insecurity, abandonment, not feeling loved, it's all the same feelings, just dressed up differently. So it's not
Yes.
any less important or any less severe. It still creates
Right.
those same emotions.
It does. It does. And I think it's just really important to know what you deserve and knowing
Yeah.
that there are people out there right now who want to emotionally invest
Mm-hmm.
regardless of your past experiences or your relationship template, knowing that there are partners who want to grow with you, who
Mm-hmm.
want to create a healthy reciprocal relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to know that and really take it in.
Will you, before we get to questions and stuff, would you talk a little bit about the tendency for people who are in narcissistic relationships to gravitate towards non-reciprocal relationships?
Definitely. Yeah. So, yeah, if you've been in that relationship with a narcissist, I think you develop this template of walking on eggshells. There's a lot of constantly tuning into the partner and really trying to do whatever it is to keep the peace in the relationship. And you become isolated, you lose that sense of self, and you really learn that when I'm in a relationship, I have to focus on their needs and not listen to mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the template becomes let me be whoever I have to be to keep this relationship going, and let me be who I have to be to stay safe. And when you're so isolated in a narcissistic relationship, right, you fear abandonment so deeply because you're isolated and you don't have other
You
people.
don't have anyone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that low self-worth also, right? Like anytime you're leaving a toxic relationship, recovering from relationship with a narcissist, you have to heal your self-worth and really know what you deserve. So some of that residual low self-worth, anyways, all of those factors, you become much more vulnerable to be attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable. And there's one other important piece, which I feel like you'll agree with too, is that in that abusive relationship, intimacy was not safe, right? Like
Correct.
you
Correct.
associated, oh my gosh, I got so close and it was
Yes.
painful and it was not
Yes.
safe. So
That's a really hard
subconsciously,
concept for partners of narcissists to understand, that sex is not an intimate
yeah,
thing. It's not sensual. It's not love.
yeah,
It's none of that. It's painful. It's hurtful. It's
yes,
manipulative. It's just,
exactly.
yeah.
So emotionally, somebody who's emotionally unavailable may feel safer to you. Like
Right.
logically, you're not thinking that, but unconsciously, you may be attracted to this person who's emotionally unavailable because that distance is actually what kind of feels safe.
Right.
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 So I know that's taking it a level deeper, but just trying
No,
to
but
understand.
it's so interesting because, you know, again, it's kind of one end and then it's, you know, as you know, when you work with people on behavior change, it's
Yeah.
normal to go from one extreme to the other and then kind of slowly work your way to the middle. So that
Exactly.
makes a ton of sense that somebody who is emotionally unavailable would feel safe, that those highs and
Yes.
lows aren't there.
Right.
It's this, but what you don't realize is it's this. Right. Um, so
Yes.
that's very interesting.
Yes. Great
Um,
question.
so do you any other before I even do you have any other point sixes, sevens, and eights?
I did have a point
Okay, good.
six. Yeah, and this is actually just what you said, really, of you know that you're in a non-reciprocal relationship when you've plateaued and you are not getting closer. There's not that growth that you feel. You don't feel like you're getting to know the person. And it's just like, okay, it's comfortable in a bad way of
Hmm.
we're not getting closer emotionally. Like it can even feel like, wow, there's really a wall. No matter how hard I try to get to know you, I'm not learning things about you. I'm not feeling that you're being vulnerable with me. No matter how hard I try to break that down, that's a sign that it's non-reciprocal.
Now, if we flip this around, the non-reciprocal person, the person who is limited or is not capable of being emotionally close, what
Mhm.
could be something that in their upbringing or their patterns that lends itself to that kind of manifestation in a relationship?
Great question. A lot of that can come from either a parent figure that was overly involved and took up a lot of emotional space in their life, and that they learned that, wow, intimacy feels very overwhelming. I feel trapped when I'm close to people. I lose my identity. And then they learn early on, I need to be independent and take care of myself. So that's one way. Or it could be that they did depend on someone and they had a healthy relationship and then they were abandoned or they were, horribly hurt. And once again, they learned it's not safe to be close. I need to be independent. Or they were totally neglected and just never even had a close relationship to go off of, right? And I mean neglected emotionally, right? That can show up a
Hmm.
lot of ways.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
lots of potential origins,
Hmm.
but the fear of I can't depend on someone because they may reject me, they may not make space for me, or I'm not going to be able to maintain the relationship.
It sounds for different reasons, but it actually sounds similar for both parties, that fear of rejection or fear of abandonment or needing
Yes,
distance, needing space. So it's in a weird way, it's kind of similar, but for different reasons.
it's exactly true that core fear and anxious
Mm-hmm.
and avoidant attachment
Mm-hmm.
style is a lot of times very similar, and then
Mm-hmm.
the strategy of coping with it just
Mm-hmm.
shows up very differently.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. I love
um,
that.
yeah.
So I'm gonna ask people. We're not gonna be able to get to all of them, but anyone have any questions? We'll take three. I will leave it up to you to pick the ones that you want to answer.
Sure. Are they in the chat? I'm so bad with
So if you guys have
finding
questions, if
them.
you can submit them, or you can just post them on here, and we will answer them. Or I guess we could scroll up and
Yeah,
I don't have my glasses. I can't even see these.
I know.
Excuse
Okay,
us.
I have one.
Okay.
What's something we can do to start bringing up our self-worth after decades of having that be invalidated? So she's talking about how can you raise your self-worth after going through those toxic relationships. I bet you and I could talk like for hours about
For
that.
hours. For hours. It's like that's a loaded question.
Yeah, I can say a couple of simple things. Love to hear what you would say. Start really working on tuning into yourself and validating yourself and developing that as a habit. Because if you have that low self-worth, you've been used to going external and always checking in with other people.
Yes.
So develop the habit of go internal, validate yourself, ask yourself what you're feeling. That's one of my top ones.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
so 100% yes. And then I would probably say something along the lines of, instead of going to external variables, external factors to define your self-worth, if you can think of 5 things, write them down. And I usually tell people, if I can't see it, if I'm recording you, then it doesn't count. So give me 5 things that in the past, or things in a perfect world, that you would want to accomplish, that you feel would give you a sense of mastery. Because accomplishing these small, tiny goals, I don't even care if it's doing a load of laundry, but something that you want to get back into that you haven't been able to do for whatever reason, break it into insultingly small steps so you can accomplish it. Because it's not about accomplishing the goal necessarily in this case. It's about a sense of mastery, showing yourself that you can do it. It's not about doing the laundry or going to, going to get your hair done. It's about the actual accomplishment of it. And so I think by doing a lot of those things, then you get that internal boost of self-worth and that internal that separation between your internal self and the external world.
I love that so much. That would have been my number 2 as well. Basically what you're talking about is you're building that trust with yourself that I can show up for me.
Yes,
I can have behaviors.
That.
Yeah, I can show up for me. I can have behaviors that honor my worth. And a lot of times we just can't cognitively think that.
Right.
We have to have the behaviors to then create the self-worth. So.
Yours sounds way more poetic than I would say.
No, you explained it great. You explained it great. That's exactly what we need.
Yours sounds much sweeter than mine. But it's true. You have to learn to trust yourself. It's so true. It's so true.
People oftentimes they're waiting to have the self-worth and then do the behavior. Yeah. But you have to create the behaviors to then trust yourself and know you're going to show up for you, and then the self-worth comes.
Yes, which means you're going to have to do these behaviors and simultaneously feel crappy. If you wait to feel better, you're going to be waiting forever. You really have to feel crappy and at the same time do the smallest task. And then the next time that crappiness will be a little less and a little less. All the while, kind of what you were saying, which I think is brilliant. I never looked at it like that. You have to trust yourself. You have to learn to trust yourself.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
So take one more. You pick. I can't read it anyway.
Oh gosh.
And also, just for you guys, if you have additional questions, feel free to DM both of us. Someone asked if this is going to be saved. This will be saved on IGTV, so you can find the link on my Instagram page or on your page. We'll share the link.
Yeah. There's so many good questions. Okay. I like this question. How do we know, this is in the beginning of a relationship, how do we know if it's our gut that's saying that this is a non-reciprocal relationship, or is it just anxious attachment? So trying to distinguish between non-reciprocal or am I feeling anxiously attached? Whew.
I'll let you take that one. That's a good question.
Great question. So I love that question because it really speaks to the importance of conscious dating and really, really being aware of what's going on and how we're feeling and what's going on for our partner. My first tip with that is you do need to go internal and really ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling? What is the evidence for this? Why am I feeling this? Where is it coming from? So this is some, reality testing intervention here. Like, how am I feeling? What's the evidence? What's the evidence that this person is interested in me, right? And really just taking time to process it before you're saying, oh my gosh, they're not putting in effort. Because you do need to check in with yourself and notice where your reaction is coming from before you're then bringing it to your partner. So I guess part two is, though, once you've done that, and if you've determined, you know what, this really is feeling non-reciprocal, you do have the right then to bring it to your partner and get curious about where they're at. So that could be a longer explanation. But knowing that you always have the right to check in with your partner, right? And ask them where they're at. You always have that right.
And I think if you feel that you can't, that's kind of an indicator too, that if you feel like you're going to be met with this, kind of non-validating response, that kind of is part of your answer in a way.
Exactly. You need to feel like you can come to your partner and have these conversations because you have every right to. And that's part of what co-creating secure attachment is about. I talk about that. It's a co-creation. It's not just one person. So you get to do that together with your partner.
Right. My last question before we go. When we talk about codependency, right? We talk about two people that kind of feed off each other in a very unhealthy way, right? They fit together, but they fit together. It creates dysfunction. And if you have somebody that is a plastic plant and you have somebody who is avoidant of emotions, but not in the same way, let's say they're not necessarily emotionally detached, they're just kind of handle emotions differently, let's say, would you consider that kind of almost like a codependent, I don't know if I'm using the right word for that, but kind of toxic, unhealthy relationship or is that one that works?
Great question. I see these dynamics. They do happen. I think what typically can happen here, though, is nobody is deepening the intimacy. Nobody's really moving the relationship forward. So this is one that eventually will most likely fizzle out.
Right. Okay.
Unless at some point, maybe a crisis happens or something causes them to actually want intimacy and get closer.
Right.
But you do see these dynamics. I think I don't want to stereotype younger, but I think even in colleges, like this kind of oh, we're hanging out.
Right.
And it's just comfortable and you're just kind of coasting. Right.
Yep.
But it's not that capacity for real long-term intimacy.
Right.
So it will fizzle out most likely.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, this was, we're gonna have to do this again because there's so many questions and I think this was such a good topic because it's just not talked about enough, right? It's kind of the other side of the wild and crazy behaviors. This is the ones that sometimes fly under the radar. So I think that this is so helpful and thank you so much for coming on. Again, please visit her site, Dr. Morgan Coaching, and definitely check out her post. She has so much good stuff on attachment styles and relationships. I stalk her page routinely and she has great stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much. This was so informative for everyone, for me. It was great.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been wanting to connect with you for forever, so I'm glad it finally happened. So it's such a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope we help some people tonight.
Yes,
with this,
me too. And again, this will be saved, and I'll send this to you so you can post it as well so your followers can see. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and thank you. And we'll definitely do it again for sure. We'll have a part 2.
Love it. Great. I love it.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.